couldn't speak as a young child at 3 years old. I had two older sisters who answered for me. I couldn't combine my vowels with my consonants, and my parents were smart enough that they hired a tutor who became my first grade teacher. And at last I was able to put my words together. And she had me learn poems and etc. And when I was 13, I was sent away to school. We performed 3 plays a year, and I was in the Forensic Society. And the Forensic Society debated dramatic monologues, comedic monologues, etc. And so I felt I could do something that was good, and perhaps be an actor. I went to a music conservatory in Ithaca, New York, a music acting conservatory called Ithaca College. And before I knew it, I was in a play. The playwright came up to Ithaca from New York City, Howard Richardson, who had written Dark of the Moon, and he said, I have an agent in Los Angeles, and if you get some pictures taken, I'll send them out and we'll see. So sure, I did. And Kevin Castleman at the Kurt Frings agency called me, and he said, come out and for the summer and see if you can work, and if you don't work, go back to school and come on out. So I did. And lo and behold, I got work. I was in Marcus Welby, the first show, the Bold Ones after that. I did a TV film called Tribes. Tracy Keenan Wynn was the writer. Joseph Sargent, the director. Darren McGavin was in it. Earl Holliman, Jan Michael Vincent. It was quite a hit. It was one of the first anti-Vietnamese war films. Shortly after that, I did a film called The Prisoners, which was the first film that was an anti-Vietnamese war film. This was with Mako, and Bill Bushnell was the director. One thing after another. When I was about 20, I said, I'd been studying acting in Los Angeles, and I felt I was missing something. So I went to England for a year and studied the Mount View Theatre in London, and came back to America. I was in demand. There was a job for me, and I needed to work. So, of the television shows I played in, The Waltons was one. I was cast as the minstrel. How I got the part is quite amazing. I went to the audition, and other actors were singing beautiful Broadway melodies, and I didn't know what to sing, except that he was a folk singer. So I sang, I've been working on the railroad. They cast me. So I played the minstrel. On the set, this grandfather Walton, Will Geer, came off the set, and he sat down, humph, and said something, and I answered him with a Robert Frost ditty, something like, forgive, O Lord, my little jokes on thee, and I'll forgive thy great big one on me. And he said, after a while, do you know a lot of poetry? And I said, he knew miles of poetry. Miles. Tennyson, Yeats. Well, we began putting together a show. He had not done a show like this since the 1950s. It was called Americana. We went around the country saying Robert Frost, Walt Whitman, Mark Twain, and singing the Woody Guthrie story, which he was a great friend of Woody Guthrie. It was a wonderful, revival of the poetic arts in the United States, and we had a great time doing it. And it sort of leads into what later became a part of my life, poetry. My agent, Kevin Castleman, had been the agent of Anne Margaret, and we went to Vegas to see Anne Margaret's show, and lo and behold, in the dressing room was Anne Margaret's helper, Mrs. Collins, and Mrs. Collins had a lovely daughter, Kathy Collins, and my agent, Kevin Castleman, said, she's very pretty. Perhaps somebody like John Derek can take photographs of her, and photographs are taken. And lo and behold, John Derek and Kathy Collins decided to make a film called Once Upon a Love in Greece. And we all trooped over to Greece, and I played Damir, a Greek fisherman, and Kathy Collins, who later became Bo Derek, played my love interest. Despite the fact that the film was a 1973 piece, it was not released until 1981. Yay. As Fantasies. It had been called Once Upon a Love, but now Fantasies, and it was distributed after Bo Derek's film 10. visiting Rome, I was acquainted with a Iron Man in Rome, Charles Moses. He was Mr. Fix-It. And over the years, he introduced me to a gentleman by the name of Gino Bardi. And Gino Bardi became Dino De Laurentiis' dramaturge. And Dino De Laurentiis wanted to sort of capitalize on the phenomena of Jaws, and he did his mechanical whale, the mechanical killer whale, Orca. And lo and behold, Gino Bardi, the dramaturge, suggested me, and I was seen for the part, and Michael Anderson, the director, cast me. I was very, very thankful. In the midst of filming, Michael Anderson and I began talking, and he had rented a place in Rome in 1973 near the old Forum. And I was on Charles Moses's rooftop in the attico, and lo and behold, I saw this couple over a few houses down, and it turned out to be Michael Anderson and his wife who were renting the attico. Years later, he's my director. There must be some sort of subliminal connection there, I like to think. Orca was my first really big budget film. It had just wonderful crew, and Michael Anderson, quite a gentleman director, and of course Richard Harris and Charlotte Rampling, dazzling. And I love to see her getting all the good roles now. She's just really very deserving and a brilliant actress she's become. And again, I worked with Bo Derek. They thought we were a good fit, and we enjoyed each other. One of the loveliest and liveliest actors I've ever worked with was Richard Harris. He and Michael Anderson had worked together years prior in a film about soccer, and they were chummy. Richard was huge, bigger than life, huge, tall, gangly, handsome, vivacious, really very brilliant man. He knew lots about a lot of things. He had an exceptional career in Camelot, in the theater in Miami. He had a little place in the Bahamas, an island, and that was his later life, and it was very sad to hear that he'd passed. After Orca, boy, I was very fortunate. I was cast in The Inglourious Basterds as a real bastard, Tony, the punk, racist SOB. I had a wonderful director, Enzo Castellari, who was so vivacious and so giving as a person. It just was infectious, the joy on the set. It was a lot of fun to make that film with Fred Williamson and Bo Svensson. We had a good tumble, all of us. In the midst of this shoot-'em-up film, World War II film, the Italians, I think because of the Red Scare over there, they completely didn't want any guns to be fired on film. So there was this sort of temporary law passed that we couldn't use guns. So Enzo Castellari, we were invited to dinner at Prince Ruspoli. His wife was in the film, Catherine, and we went to this lovely old castle in the country near Rome, and there was this armor and weaponry from the Middle Ages, and suddenly Enzo said, well, I wonder if we can hire the castle at Bracciano and use that. And sure enough, that was created, and we were able to scale the walls and break into the old armory and use slingshots and this, that, and the other. And this was Enzo's, this is why I think he came from the circus. It was all about acrobatics and such. But it was a delightful film to work on. A month after The Inglourious Basterds finished, I went up to Germany and filmed an Italian-German production called The Fifth Commandment, the director Duccio Tessari, elegant director, and with Helmut Berger. We played robbers during the rise of Hitlerism in the 1930s, and we were captured by the brown shirts, Hitler's own brown shirts. So in a way, it was kind of a propagandistic capture of two robbers. It was quite a film, very elegantly directed, and I've seen it. It was really quite good. During these years, I felt I had some sort of career developing. So when I returned to Los Angeles and was screen tested for Doctor Strange, the master of the mystic arts, and got the film, I felt very, very happy. It was a kind of a dream come true, a possible television series in a very technologically innovative type of superhero on screen. Special lenses, special effects. It was new for television. It was a big production for television. And Universal really pulled out the stops, and Phil DeGuerre was the writer, creator, director, and it was with Sir John Mills and Jessica Walter. It was a good cast as well. After we were designated to be shown opposite the second showing of Roots, all expectation was with us, but everybody watched the second showing of Roots. Our ratings were very low, so every hope, every, how do you say, the pilot going into a series, well, it was dashed. Immensely disappointing. I know I was so disappointed and disillusioned that, well, I did what I'd always wanted to do, live in New York City. I moved immediately. Living in New York City, it's not the film world that Los Angeles is, that's for sure. I was lucky in getting cast in The Soldier, James Glickenhaus film. This would have been 1983, 82, something like that. It was shot in Buffalo, New York. People in Rome remembered me, and I was cast in many spaghetti war films, not many, let's say 3 or 4 or 5. Let's say Donatella Donati, the daughter of the producer of Inglourious Basterds, remembered me. Werner Pokat, an actor who was also a casting director in Los Angeles, remembered me. And so I was sort of sight unseen. Oh, yes, we can use him. He's dependable. So I would find myself in the Philippines and Santo Domingo, once again with Bo Svensson, in Yugoslavia, a World War II film directed by Umberto Lenzi. The daughter of one of the producers of Inglourious Basterds, Donatella Donati, was producing a film, rather an apocalyptic Mad Max type of film called 2020, Texas Gladiators. At any rate, these types of spaghetti war opportunities were I loved working in Italy. I loved working with the Italians. We don't have a huge crew. You get to know somebody. You go into the jungle and you help carry equipment. It's a whole different type of filmmaking, and I enjoyed myself immensely in Rome. Also, it's a great city to live in. One of the most important projects I've ever worked on in my life was with the great poet James Merrill, and that is Voices from Sandover. It developed from a reader's theater to a video film. It's a document of its time in the early 90s, and it is with the poet James Merrill saying his part, and it's an hour and a half of really spectacular poetry. Living in New York City, I don't know, it was a change of life. I had a saturation point with show business, and there came a time when I just sort of said, enough. And I needed a break, so I took an apartment in St. Augustine, Florida. I'm originally from Florida. And lo and behold, I found myself not returning to New York City or Los Angeles in the business, and I found myself in retirement. And I eventually moved to Sarasota, and I guess it was with the re-release of the film Inglourious Basterds that I was publicized as having been in the original in the local Sarasota Free Press. And my friend Michael, who was the director, Michael Lang, saw it, and he contacted me, and he was involved with a project called Soul Eater that he had devised, and we filmed it, and it was terrific. It was suddenly like 20 years later, 15 years later, riding a bicycle again. It was wonderful to act again, and Michael is very sympathique, and we had a terrific time, and I wish the film all the best.